What's up everybody? Hope y'all are doing well. I'm here today with a model railroad video with this Athearn Blue Box SD40-2. Now what livery is it going to be? I'm not going to reveal it just yet, but if you've seen my recent Commerce Park videos, there was something that is really clearly visible in the video that I did not mention what it was, that was in some scenes that will get some nice motive power added to it. And this is going to be one of the locomotives that will be done. So here's really the early stages. I found the Blue Box kit on the cheap, but now the challenge is updating the electronics. Of course, the Blue Box runs on DC, and one clear example of the functions of DC is you can see the metal connectivity where the cab is supposed to be, including the default headlight and the metal contacts. It just picks up track power off the rails. One side is the power, and then the other side just sends it to ground, and it just runs through the motor and everything. There is not a lot of logical function or anything to it. But we're going to be doing something special to this unit. We're going to be adding a LokSound 5 decoder on top of a NixTrainz Decoder Buddy. So lifting up the SD40-2 shell, which was already unscrewed from the unit, we see the motor, the internals, the connections to the trucks, and I just sort of placed a NixTrainz Decoder Buddy and a LokSound Select decoder, 21 pin, on top to demonstrate hopefully the prospect of being able to put this unit on top of the motor like in most units. But in the case of Athearn Blue Box locomotives, that has been a challenge, and I've had to do all sorts of things. So as a recap, we have the trucks here. This is the supply portion of the power. So this side of the truck will pick up from the active rail. It doesn't really matter in DC. It can go either way. One side's just going to be dropping the potential to the other. So it comes off the left side of the truck, let's say, over here, finds its contact. They're supposed to touch, or else the locomotive's wheel won't be powered. And it looks like if I put it on the track right now, it'll be very difficult for electricity to flow. So I'll remove this unit, which was not adhered to yet. It goes through this contact to the motor, and then the same happens from the other side. And there are kind of a parallel circuit happening here. So the motor is going to be taken from top to bottom using these contacts and two hot springs that we'll see when we take apart the locomotive. It goes to the bottom, and on the parallel circuit here, it goes through it feeds the headlight and comes down to ground. Now, what's interesting about the ground on the Athearn Blue Box and even the ready-to-roll units is that the ground is traditionally attached to the frame of the locomotive. So the frame, in and of itself, is hot as well. And that's how the other side of the trucks get their electrical contact. So without further ado, let's take apart this SD40-2 and we'll get our electrical tools ready. You will need soldering iron if you want to do this. You will need tin. You will need flux, and as a recommendation, a combination of this 3M double-sided tape and the Kapton tape that's allowed to compact and seal some of the components. So we'll start by removing the light piece from the front of the unit connected to the ground. So we'll take the screwdriver flathead here, allow it to break free, and then it's out. And then the next piece comes out so easy that all you have to do is just say A, B, C, D, E, and it's gone. Alright, so to take out the motor, I'm going to remove these end caps from the trucks to free up the axle that delivers the mechanical flow. And then this will free up the actual motor to be plucked out. And we're going to do this very carefully because I did another take with the other unit, and it was not pretty, so I want to show the pretty way. So without further ado, let's get going. Grabbing a flathead screwdriver, we want to unclip this guy right here. Came off very easily, and that frees up the entire truck. Now, looking at the truck up close, you can see where the ground connection is. It's this entire plate right here that's next to the gear. And then for the other side, we will do the same thing. We will grab it grab it from this loose end. Let me do it on this side. And it springs out like crazy, but that's okay. It's plastic and it's pretty durable. I've done it quite a few times on these locomotives. So now you've freed up the entire frame, and the next step is to push this guy out. So I will use a Phillips head screwdriver to have more pull on these pads. So, little word about these pads. Once they come out, these will not go back in. So in order to work on the blue box unit for electrical or for anything, if you need to replace the motor, Athearn does sell these new motor mounting pads for a nominal price. Not dirt cheap, but it's worth it. It's fair, at least to have this access to be able to do it reversibly. So taking the screwdriver, I'll just carefully force it a little bit on, and it just comes out like that. And of course I butchered this shot again by kicking the gear worm, but that's okay, not a big deal. It's all just a solid metal body now. So you can see something very, very shiny at the bottom of the fuel tank, and that is the contact that goes from the bottom of the motor, which is motor gray, to the ground source, which would be the frame, the hot frame. So that's how the power goes back to that rail towards the ground portion of the circuit, is through this contact right here. And of course the frame is in contact with the front metal pad here, which is connected to the headlight. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to isolate this by using Kapton tape and focusing our sole ground connection over here with soldering, so it becomes nice and simple. So we'll take a length of Kapton tape, approximately the length of that strip and then some, cut it off with a scissor. You can see we got this piece, and then I will take, with the help of some tweezers, I will apply it along the line, leaving enough space to completely cover the electrical contact and then some. And then allow it to kind of go in there. It's pretty malleable here. And then just make sure that you have complete isolation so that you don't mistakenly short the locomotive by having any of these hotter DCC contacts. And we're going to further aid this by either cutting off, this is up to you, you either cut off these little pins or you invert it upside down. So this is the bottom, this is the top. You can switch the order. This is entirely up to you. But I'm just going to leave this here with the with these two little prongs cut out, and this side will be remaining on the top. You can use a flathead screwdriver to remove the clip here, but it must be done very, very, very gently. There is a spring that will pop recklessly if you don't use caution. You can see the spring is right here, and I got the piece to come out. The purpose of doing this is we are going to be taking one end of this, whatever you choose, and soldering the gray wire, and the other one the orange wire, and we'll be cutting these connections off. In order to cut the connections, if you wish to do so, you could bend these by hand, take a set of snips, line it flush with the pad here, and just work it, and it cuts very easily. You can use a file to smooth out the incision, or just use a pair of pliers to turn it the other way, which I might just do. Alright, so next steps, we're going to take this flux colophane and create a spot whereas we can rest a nice little soldering pad on the very edge of this metal piece that's over here. That way we can attach the first wire, which will be the gray wire since we're on the bottom of the unit. So just taking some kind of a brush, take my little dab out, and then just gently apply it over here. So now it's can activate it. There's the audio feed with the Miami area railroads in the background. And once the iron is tinned, which takes a couple of minutes, as some of you may be familiar with, we will now apply some rosin core solder. Put it on the end here. Hopefully it catches. I thought it was catching, but I guess not. There we go. Just be very careful. You will burn your fingers if you touch the metal when you're not supposed to. So I gotta be very careful dabbing it here. Small dab will do. And I gotta be even more careful and quick because the heat will transfer to your fingers since it is copper. The idea of the flux colophane is it does speed up this process. Maybe a little bit more and we'll be set. So in order to do this locomotive stuff in mass, I was able to purchase the Digitrax wires. So I got strands of various colors, so conveniently I got gray right here. So I'll just cut a reasonable length of it, maybe about 2 inches, because, or 1.5 inches, since this is going to go from the bottom to the top. Where is my wire cutter? So very simple snip like that, cuts it very easily, and then we strip the ends. I have like a very fine stripper right here which I could use. I just take the smallest edge maybe. As you can see, there is some luster on the very edge. Doesn't have to be too long, doesn't have to be too short either. And if it's too long, you can always correct it by cutting on the edge a little bit. It's worth noting that tinning it might also aid in the process of stripping the edge of the wire because the plastic will just melt away, though it's probably less pleasant, especially due to the smell. See a little bit here, a little dab here, a little dab on the other end. Make the end tinned and it will just flow over to the wire. And if it's too long, if the exposed section is too long, you can always cut it. This might be a little challenging. I'm going to go on the right side because the Decoder Buddy is going to be mounted on the right side, so I want to have the least distance between the bottom gray section and the and voila. It was hard to see, but we have a connection. Of course, to retach it, we clip the short end on the left side, and then you just push down the long end, and we now have the gray end of the motor. Remember, the process is absolutely identical on the other side, except we just have to be very careful grabbing the little copper plate here. So I just put a finger on there to restrain it, and we free it up, leaving the spring intact. So as you can see, the spring is loose, so just be careful, don't lose it. Only difference is with the orange wire, since we are much closer to the Decoder Buddy board, which I will show right over here. And you can see the two motor attachments are on one side of it. We will not need to cut it as long, so we'll cut it about maybe 1 inch or so. Of course, here the difference is that instead of going for the right side, this wire will emerge from the left side because this is inverted as opposed to the gray wire. So you'll see what I mean when I actually mount this back onto the motor. So you see here it's the motor's here, the bottom plate is here with the wire going out that way so that the motor wire can feed up that way. So we're going to keep it going in the same direction, and then we snap in from the back just like before. Grab onto this little hook right here, get it on this side, and then looking more carefully as we look for a snap here. Let the camera zoom, come on, get in there, focus, 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 and it snaps like a Lego brick. Voila. Since we now did the motor and are ready to reassemble the chassis and the trucks and all the gearing, one additional easy step that can be done while everything is broken apart facilitates the wiring of the the powered pickup wires. So they come in through this contact here, which is usually attached in a blue box to this metal plate that we got rid of, this little strip. We have no intention of reusing that, so we don't need this much metal, and as little metal as possible allows us to avoid any shorts. And of course, this extra metal piece down here, which is going to stay pretty much in constant contact with the frame of the locomotive, is the ground pickup lead. So I can use these scissors because I've cut brass with them. Hint hint, the Miami iron scrap guns. So putting the scissor here, or you can use wire cutter, snippers, your tool of choice. Just make sure that you contain it in an area that it doesn't fly everywhere. This should be good. And maybe a little bit lower, and the deed is done. You can also use a Dremel. It might be a little hardcore, just be careful, don't break anything here. I've tried the Dremel and I've actually broken the blades of the Dremel. Meanwhile, I'll take advantage of the opportunity to also prepare these contacts for wiring. Grab a bit of some flux, get a little brush or cotton swab or your tool of choice, your utensil of choice. Apply some on the top there. Get your hot soldering iron. I'm taking advantage of the fact that this thing is still hot from the previous step. Grab some resin. Hopefully the tip will take it. Looks like it did. And just gently and nicely slide it onto the top here. And now you have a tinned tip. Repeat it for all the other trucks, and I'll come back with the next step. Alright, so the trucks are ready to go back in, as well as the motor. We're ready to reassemble the mechanical portion of the locomotive. But remember a couple things that happened before and how we have to adapt to them now. So one of the things that of course happened was that that we took these off, and there's a very good chance that these original mounting pads are not going to go back in as snugly, even though the one I just held in my hand actually looks pretty good. But for longevity and durability, we invest in the Athearn spare part mounting pads. So that's item 84028. So this gives us a remove as you will selection. So we put that in by attaching it like so. Make sure that the holes on the screw, holes for the screw do line up, so we have some symmetry here, so that the screws can go as deeply as possible. And then the other unit comes in here. So that's set up. These are going to be facing the fireman's side because the motor attachments on the Decoder Buddy are facing the fireman's side, if I recall, if I did this correctly. So we'll actually start now by mounting the trucks back in. Remember that the gear worm goes towards the end of the unit. Let me make sure that this is at least the correct one. I don't think there's any difference. It's just maybe just a snugness factor. Yeah, this one seems to fit this unit better. I don't think it matters. These are exactly the same frame, inch by inch. It's just the shell is going to be different because one's a snoot and the other isn't. There's your other hint as to what railroad this is. And of course you can see the number loudly printed. That should really give it away if you've been following my stuff. Anyhow, more important business here. Okay, so the one that has the mounting pads, so yeah, you can see the wires are ready. So in order to best do this, we start putting in these connectors here. And then since these knots are very flimsy, make sure this goes in, and make sure this also goes in. So it looks like the sequence could be a little up to you now as far as reinstalling this unit. So I got these to pretty much line up. So now the clips at the end of the chassis or the mechanical gear functions go in. So this is pretty much locked in now. And the other one, where did it fly off? The other one will take it from here, put it up front on the engine, on the cab side here. So that's great. And then now all we have to do is I'll flip this upside down so that the weight is just hanging out here. Take a Phillips head screwdriver and attach the screws that are included with the mounting pads back in like so. So here we go. It's going in. I'll go diagonally to cover each side evenly. And then we'll just gradually tighten these. So the nice thing is you can just add and remove it as you please. If you need to work on the engine, if the motor decides to die, you can always replace it. And this is very likely if one of my wires breaks free from the solder. These are very delicate wires. You don't want to pull too hard on them or else they will break off, and this happens a lot, especially when I use the buddy and close the shell. It happens a lot with the LED lights and with the motor wires and whatnot. They do tend to break free sometimes. At least it's a lot more serviceable than using what appears to be some very one-time parts. Of course, one of the biggest ways to check if the gearing is good is to just spin the little coils here, and if the engine spins pretty flawlessly as you're seeing now, then you're in good shape because all the gearing is interlocked with the turning of the motor here. Now the next step is not even that much of an electrical step. We're going to be taking some 3M double-sided tape, mounting tape I believe they call it. I'm going to cut a length about the size of this that can fit in between the little lips there, and we will set up to put the Decoder Buddy. So as you can see, there's a little slot left over that we can put a little more masking tape, or mounting tape rather, on there. And of course, the Decoder Buddy is just going to go right on top. So I will demonstrate this for the unit up front that we're zoomed into and focused on. And I want to make sure this is in an optimal direction. There's no right or wrong really to this installation, just optimal or preferable or whatever have you. So NixTrainz Decoder Buddy. If you see my video on Commerce Park taken about 2 years ago, I demonstrated a little bit of what this can do. So NixTrainz Decoder Buddy allows you to place a 21-pin decoder on top of your installation and have the lighting functions be mounted separately in a removable auxiliary board. That way, if you need to work on the engine, you don't have to deal with wires twirling and then the shell just dangling off the side of it. So it becomes easier to work with, and yeah. So of course, motor and some auxiliary inputs, capacitors and whatnot will be done on the main board. So we'll remove the protective edge of the mounting tape, the protective cover here. So if we look here on the Decoder Buddy, we see on the auxiliary board AOF, anode for the front headlight. So the front of the engine is facing that way, so we're going to mount the board like so. And we'll mount the shell of the locomotive back on. Don't want to mess these wires up. And you can see that we are able to put back the dynamic brake housing, for now at least, without having any issues coming from the Decoder Buddy installation. So this will seal it pretty nicely. Of course, you do have to run the wires around the LokSound 5 decoder, which we will install later. So this is the matching view that we have for the Decoder Buddy up here, and we can see that the orange is going to be going on the right side and the gray is going to go on the left side. So that's the next step for this installation. Alright, so at this point it becomes pretty evident. These wires are quite long. Or are they? Well, let's at least make the adjustment first to get the gray one in. Gray one might be about, okay, half an inch too long. So, no problem. We take some wire cutter, go to the end, cut it by about as much length. So half an inch roughly would be about this long. Should still be plenty of room left. You want to have a little bit of extra room in case the wire snips free from the other end, or in case you mess up. So we leave a little bit of slack, but you want to minimize the amount of wire because it does take space. So I strip the end again, and I will tin it again. We'll do the same for the orange, and then we will prepare the motor gray and motor orange for installation. Alright, so I trimmed not only the gray but also the orange a little bit, and we are ready to install it into the Decoder Buddy board. And the neat thing is you can see there are two holes for the orange and gray, so I can just run the wire from under, make it nice and convenient. And then we can bend it into place, so I'll bend it kind of inwards. Make sure it doesn't touch any of the other electrical components. That way we can take, now my iron is hot, good. We can take some flux and just run it over that pad, and that essentially will do double duty of preparing both the pad for the actual solder as well as also tinning the edge of the wire without having to do an extra step. So I'll take the flux here, my little brush, just dab it over the pad, and I'll pre-dab it over the other one as well. It does linger for a little bit. So now, good to go. And just like that, the solder is applied, and it's pretty much stuck. Nowhere to go for the wire, and I'm just going to neatly retread it under here, which is going to be the plan. So we want to run it inside and under where between where the motor itself is and the board. That way there is no bleeding outside, and then that will make it very difficult to actually place the shell in. However, it's nice to note that the shell is a drop-in shell without any clicking or any crazy things, which is much easier than the other blue box locomotives that I worked with. I'll do the same for orange and come right back. So now that both wires are in, the simple step is now to take a small piece of Kapton tape and just run it over. Alright, next step is the application of the track pickups. So I will not show myself cutting and sizing the wire. I'm just going to show the wires going from point A to point B. Now, in a normal locomotive and in a lot of locomotives that feed off the instructions from the NixTrainz Decoder Buddy, you're going to have two on both sides, going to one pickup and then the other pickup. But since the Athearn Blue Box presents a unique configuration where both of the trucks receive the ground from the frame, you only need one of the ground pickups to be plugged in. The other two would just be the electrical potential end going from the engineer side pickups. Well, I kind of lied about my selfish will to not show the tinning and slicing and stripping of all the wires. I am going to show how to tin, or at least a spot, a choice spot to tin the pickup for the ground. So I'm just going to dab some solder and flux on top of this metal clip, and we should be all set. And the wires are pre-cut. I pick a thicker wire for the ground because it is carrying double the load, so might as well just go with that. Don't think it's a necessary step, but doesn't hurt. So we're going to begin going right ahead with the electrical clip here. I'm going to grab some extra resin just to make sure, just to be on the safe side, and make the bond pretty solid here. So just gonna nicely, perfect, and then we're gonna feed it to the fireman side track pickup. And I emphasize it, we have to be very careful with the choices here, because if you feed the wire to the wrong pickup, if you feed this on the other side and say you put a track pickup or like a potential drop pickup wire on this side, then your decoder's fried. It's that simple. So I'm just keeping it very consistent with what side these contacts and pads are. The wire will eventually be reshaped accordingly. Just want to make sure that at least there's a solid soldering connection, so these wires don't abruptly break free. I'd say speed is your worst enemy when doing this, because if you rush it, you will definitely run into trouble. And yeah, here it doesn't have to be pretty. It's not pretty at all, but we did it. And the nice thing about the Decoder Buddy is these come pre-soldered, these pads. But the unfortunate thing is these are only the easy pads, because it only gets harder when you work with the actual locomotive. And I want to keep some, you want to keep some play here, because you're going to be steering these trucks down some tight curves. Well, maybe not that tight, but at least 22-inch radius. So you do want to have enough play so that it doesn't snap the wire or anything like that. Now for the other side. I'm going to free it because just want to make sure. Yeah, it's a little, the exposed section is a little long. I'm going to trim that a little bit. And I think that's solid. So now you officially have a DCC connected locomotive. What's next now is we got to put the speaker, and that might require some additional craftsmanship, because we're going to also build a housing to put the speaker on. So the speaker unit, I believe that best fits this is a dual sugar cube ESU speaker, item number 50340. Comes with many plastic pieces that you can do to improve the baffle. So what I would do is I would be mounting it somewhere on here, either with styrene supports that are CA fixed to the frame and plastic cemented to each other. Alright, so due to the proven vertical space that's available in the middle here, I'm going to kind of induce that logic and put it behind. So we have the cover here for the ESU speakers, a couple of risers, and the main unit, which I'm going to cut off these holes on the side so that it can fit inside the shell. And I'll be creating a custom styrene frame to hold it in place using a piece of 0.04 inch styrene. The gritty details I won't show, but I will come back when all of this is done. The manual clearly instructs a parallel circuit. So how I will go about that is that on the loudspeaker itself, I'm going to wire from this pad to this pad, and from this pad to this pad, and then it will feed to the Decoder Buddy out that way. So it's just going to be two parallel wires, a literal parallel circuit, using this pair of pads as like the corresponding nodes for that parallel circuit. That way the sound is able to be distributed beautifully. So the wire lengths that are needed are not long at all. The shorter the better. This might even be too long. And we're going to do a lot of tinning here. And we have to be very careful with the soldering iron, because it will catch on to the magnetic end of the speakers. Just a very arbitrary tinning, but we'll get the job done. We will also tin the ends of the pads here very carefully. This might eat into the plastic, but that won't hurt too much. See, it just cut onto the magnetic portion of the speaker. But the funny thing is the resin just goes right off. Just like that. And yeah, this should be good. And now the onus is to get the wires on that side now. So I'll cut about 1.5 inch length. Very long cut. It's probably going to be a lot shorter. Take my handy dandy soldering iron. Tin up. Repeat the same for yellow. It's a long ball, but I think we have a solid connection now. So there's my Lego pick-a-brick lid, which I repurpose as a glue palette, especially for CA glue like this. This is Duro-Bren, is very, very potent, so it's caused me to have skin marks, it's caused everything. Things will stick. Chassis have stuck before when I worked on a previous model. But little goes a very long way. I'm just going to dab it over here. I put 2 pieces of 0.04 inch styrene. And I'm going to plop them in on the frame of the locomotive like that. And in a few seconds, it's going to stick. Can you believe that? I mean, this is legit. This is crazy. It's like it's already cured. Sets in seconds. Now the styrene was measured to at least clear the positive end, and as directed, the wire will stay underneath the speaker. So as you can see, I'm steering it to pretty much the limit, and the speaker is not moving. So I'll come back. I'll probably add an additional support using leftover strips of styrene, and we'll proceed to wire the speakers to the Decoder Buddy. Alright, so the wires are ready to put in. I just need to tin them really quick. Plus is green, minus is yellow. So the plan is to follow the drawing that's on the Decoder Buddy. So the plus is actually going to be facing me of the 2 speaker plugs that you see in the drawing, and then the minus is going to be facing away. So these are going to crisscross, and track B is essentially just the engineer side, providing the supply portion.
I'll be out of the seat for a second.
So without further ado, let's make sure the solder iron is ready, and we will do the crisscross and match the drawing to a T. Hot piece just flew off. That's okay, not a big deal. Let me at least make this a little more visually appealing to the camera. Tin the edges here. This one's going to melt away a little plastic. And I'm going to probably do this with a 180-degree spin here. And my Duro super glue sets so nicely, the thing doesn't want to move, which is great. That's exactly what we wanted. So yellow is going to go on the near side. Just have to make sure I don't burn my finger. Perfect. And then the track pickup wire is safe and isolated. And then green is going to go on this side. Now we should be good. Sorry for the blur. Might have missed a moment, but you now see the finished wiring for a Athearn Blue Box SD40-2 with sound and DCC. The next step is really actually the fun part. I have my LokSound 5 decoder hanging out in my Walmart drawer, ready to put in, and we will go right ahead and program this baby. So the neat thing is, and I'm actually gonna, ah shoot, I unplugged my, well, I can just go snippy snip. I got two leads right here that are not needed, so we'll recycle the wire for something else. These are very thin 36 gauge brown wire that will just be dead ends. We don't need these. Snip snip. Just make sure that these things don't create a circuit, and we should be good to go. So of course that just means I will just replace this end with the decoder to be dropped in like so. And in case anybody is wondering whether I messed up in my installation here and I'm unable to seal the SD40, it should drop quite nicely. As you can see, with all of that work, we have an Athearn SD40-2 ready to go. So now we are going to put the engine on my programming layout. Looks like a pretty complete job so far. Now it's on me to add the lights and bells and program everything, and all that mess will be done offline. So I want to thank you guys for joining me throughout this process. I hope you guys find this tutorial somewhat useful, and more importantly, hope you have enjoyed the tutorial. And I hope this helps, especially this is a unique configuration to go with a blue box and installing a LokSound 5 on a Buddy. So thanks again. If you want to see more of these, feel free to subscribe to this channel, and while you're at it, please leave a like and comment on this video. From HQ, whereas we have the FEC 714 now born, this is TE